Okay, so here we are again with me giving another BBC that has to do with current events and what's going on in the country. And in some ways, I seem to be saying the same thing comparatively from one BBC about this to the next. But the events that I'm commenting on are getting more and more outrageous, at least in my own perspective. So, in looking at what's going on, and 2 days ago, the news was so overpowering with the scandals that I couldn't keep up with all the scandals that happened in one day. Yeah. Between what they're finding out in the impeachment inquiry, and then I think the whipped cream and cherry on the cake was our dear Prez deciding to have the G7 meeting next year at his own resort, which, would have all these presidents and officials, hundreds, if not thousands, of people coming to stay at his resort, paying money to do so, okay? And him saying it would be at cost, but we all know that at cost means at cost plus. Yeah, it's called cost plus, isn't it? Yeah.
And don't forget that we're going to pay to restore the place before they come and to clean it and all of that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, so they're going to ask Venerable Yeshe to come and restore it and clean it because they got to get it done well. And she's one person who will speak up to the press. Yeah, you and Nancy Pelosi. I have confidence in the two of you. Yeah. So, as citizens, it becomes more and more alarming, and what is happening. And we have even the generals now. I mean, the Syrian thing with us walking out on people who are our allies, and the poor Kurds who have been trying for centuries to have their own country. And especially after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire broke up, they were really hoping for once to have their own country. They were supposed to. Then the colonizing powers nixed it. And so these poor people are now having to leave much of the land that is theirs in an agreement that is not a ceasefire. It's a pause in the fighting. And in the agreement that Pence made with the Turkey president, it said that the fighting, it will all be over, their movement will be over when the Turkish army has retaken the safe area. In other words, the US has given Turkey permission to take back that whole area from Syria. Yeah. So we have one thing after the other, and at some point you just go, I can't handle it anymore. But I think we have to handle it, and we have to speak up. I was quite alarmed myself for the first day after his saying that the G7 meeting was going to be at his resort. Hardly anybody said anything. And I'm going, excuse me? Even when we worked in youth, when I was on the Youth Emergency Service Board, we had to sign an agreement that the board would not hire anybody that would enrich us or our own family members. And this is for, a piddly-dink charity. Yeah. Whereas, the president of the country should be the role model, the exemplar of people who keep the laws, who has good ethical conduct. And when that's not happening, as citizens, we need to do two things. One is we need to model good ethical conduct ourselves in our own life. And two, we need to speak up and hold the president and the other people in government accountable. Yeah. If we don't speak up and we let this go on, then we have to take responsibility for the negligence. So speaking up entails writing to our Congress people, signing petitions, when there are marches, going to a march, discussing this with other people, but discussing it in a way where we really communicate with people, not where we quarrel, not where we fight, not where we make accusations, but where we really discuss what kind of country do we want to live in. Yeah, and I think that's the overriding thing. Instead of starting with picking out specific things to correct, is what kind of country do we want to live in? And then when we decide that, then hold our elected representatives and corporation CEOs accountable for this. Yeah, as well as to model good ethical conduct in our own lives. And what the tendency is at some point just to say it's too much and where's some sand I can stick my head in, we have to abandon the tendency to do that. Okay, so that doesn't mean we need to read all the news all the time. Okay, I'm not saying that, and I certainly don't favor doing that. Okay, but we need to know the important things that are happening so that we can comment on them and, like I said, hold people accountable if there are representatives. Yeah, and to not get discouraged. Yeah, we know from the mind training teachings that this is a time of degeneration. Yeah, that's one of the first things in the mind training teachings. We live in a time of the 5 degenerations, and we're seeing it all around. But the thing is, even if the environment is degenerating, we don't have to go along with it. Okay, and we can still hold our values and principles, live according to them, and then all the things that are happening, we use the mind training to practice transforming adversity into the path. So the mind training teachings were written a little bit less than a millennium ago, but they still pertain. And so if you think that things were any better a millennium ago, if they were, they probably wouldn't have written the mind training teachings then. So the whole thing is we live in samsara. We have samsaric minds. We live with others who do too. And so the real enemy is not other people. The real enemy is our own afflictions and our own self-centeredness. So we have to work on those, and especially in cases where we encounter adversity and our tendency is to get really angry and blame others or totally withdraw. And so we have to resist the tendency to do either of those behaviors and the tendency to mentally get angry. Okay, but to really hold the people in our hearts with compassion, because when we look at, the photograph that we all saw of Nancy pointing at Donnie, everybody in the room looked really grim. Yeah, nobody looks like a happy person. So you can have wealth, you can have power, and be incredibly unhappy. And we also don't know how these people were brought up. Yeah, sometimes we think the wealthy and the powerful people who came from families like that, didn't experience any suffering, but often they have a lot of suffering. Often the parents are too busy for the kids, or the parents sometimes can be very harsh with the kids because they have such high expectations of their children. So we don't really know how these people were brought up, what they went through in their lives, the expectations that are on their heads from their family and that they've put on themselves. But rather to really have an open-hearted perspective that we're dealing with people who, just like us, suffer from afflictions, suffer from samsara, and and in their case are not very happy. Yeah. So of course, that a lot of the people that they adversely affect aren't very happy. The Kurds, the impoverished, the migrants, and so on. So it's a thing of really cultivating compassion for everybody involved. Yeah. But with compassion, you can hold people accountable. And with compassion, you can clearly delineate what is acceptable behavior in certain roles and what is not acceptable behavior in those roles. Yeah. And being a president or a senator or a representative is simply a role. It's not who that person is. Okay, so we have our work cut out for us in our Dharma practice, because our Dharma practice, has to relate to this situation that we're in, and respond with hope and optimism, and that, where does the hope and optimism come from? It comes from our transforming our own mind. It's not going to come from changing the rest of the world, because, we can't change the rest of the world. Even the Buddha can't do it. Yeah, because so much depends on sentient beings' minds and sentient beings' karma. But our joy comes from our own inner transformation and the compassion that we generate for other living beings, and our understanding with wisdom what the situation is that we're in, and the power of self-grasping ignorance and the self-centered thought, and really working against those two.